is a place where mighty mastodons ran in terror from early hunters, where massive dinosaurs hogged the road on Lakeshore Drive, and 10-foot millipedes enjoyed sultry green summers. It's a city where giant sea creatures swam like submarines, and a mysterious meteor scarred the terrain. This is the story of what lived, fought, and died in prehistoric Chicago. Chicago. The biggest city of the American Midwest. It's the crossroads of a continent, the home of towering giants. And it's been that way for millions of years. If we peel back the layers of time, we reveal the grand scale of Chicago's history. 15,000 years ago, as mammoths and mastodons roamed in the Pleistocene. 70 million years passed to the Cretaceous, when dinosaurs thrived before their great extinction. 260 million years ago, in the arid Permian, when the Earth was scarred by an invader from space. To 300 million years ago, when swampy Carboniferous forests harbored crawling creatures of monstrous size. And 425 million years passed to the watery Silurian, when an ancient sea nurtured thick reefs teeming with life, only to become rock-hard limestone, now raw material for Chicago's great buildings. Chicago is where it is because this is the place where two giant water systems nearly meet, the mighty Mississippi and the Great Lakes. The city itself is on the shores of Lake Michigan, 22,000 square miles of water. A lake so wide, one shore can't be seen from the other. A lake so big, it looks like an ocean. Travel back 400 years ago. Before European explorers discovered the site. There are no signs of civilization at all. And a shallow, sluggish Chicago River dribbles into Lake Michigan on a wild and desolate beach. It looked just like a spot north of modern Chicago called Illinois Beach State Park.
This is the Dead River. We're about 40 miles north of downtown Chicago. But what we've really done is stepped back about 400 years because this is what Chicago would have looked like at that time. Low dunes, scrubby grass, a meandering inland stream. It hardly has a current at all. If you're going to describe it, you might just say lethargic at the very best. It hardly seems like a place where a great city might grow someday.
Travel back again to 13,000 years ago. When Chicago is a chilly backwoods in the Pleistocene epoch. It is an era of repeated ice ages that cycled across North America. 4 times, rock-hard glaciers advanced and retreated, digging into soft parts of the terrain and gouging out the basins that became the Great Lakes. Now, 13,000 years ago, Chicago is underwater. The glacier on Lake Michigan is melting. But what's left of it acts as a natural dam, forcing water to back up 5 miles beyond the modern-day shoreline. 440,000 acres of the future city are totally flooded. Chicago of today would be inundated by the glacial lake. Sears Tower and the rest of the city's skyscrapers would be sitting in water 40 to 50 feet deep, flooding their lower stories. Any building less than 4 stories tall would vanish under the lake. High points near the ancient shore became islands in the lake. Islands that remain as hills and rises in the landscape of today. One of them is 20 miles south of downtown.
I'm standing on the corner of 111th Street and Longwood Drive, and the ridge behind me is called Blue Island. Now, to get to Lake Michigan, I would have to go straight in that direction for 6 miles. But imagine being here 13,000 years ago when the high waters of Lake Chicago were actually halfway up that slope right there.
This is Chicago at the end of the last ice age. A family of elephant-like creatures lumbers across Blue Island. They are American mastodons, ancient animals that have been roaming North America for more than 3.5 million years. But now, the ice is retreating. And though the climate is still cool, it is a place where mastodons can thrive, alongside their cousins, the great woolly mammoths. These two relatives of modern-day elephants have left behind many fossils across Chicagoland.
In the greater Chicago area, there's probably somewhere in the range of 50 to 75 sets of remains that have been found from either a mastodon or a mammoth.
Some of those remains are being excavated from a site in a section of parkland outside Chicago. The dig is located in Pratt's Wayne Woods Forest Preserve, about 35 miles from downtown Chicago.
You could make something out of that.
The area was originally an ancient marsh, later drained for use as farmland. Park managers have recently been restoring it to its natural state. But something they found in excavating the soil has now turned parkland into a fossil dig.
This is the tooth that brought us to this site.
The tooth belongs to an American mastodon, which lived in Chicago at the end of the most recent ice age.
The Chicago environment was cold, birch forest, and lovely for mastodons, full of mastodons.
We are standing at the shore of an ancient glacial lake. It is now marshland because of the thousands of years that have intervened. It would have been cold, and we'd had these great animals coming down to drink. And we know this because of the remains of this animal that was found.
So this is where we think the mastodon is.
Scott Demmel is an archaeologist at Chicago's Field Museum. He's directing the dig in its hunt for more mastodon fossils.
This last season, we thought the mastodon might be situated like this, with the head and the tusk up this way, where we found fragments of that, most of the body being further to the east. But we didn't find anything out here that was from the mastodon. So we think that the mastodon might be situated like that, or perhaps even further to the north. And so next year, our work will focus further on the east and north ends of this site.
The painstaking work will take years to complete. There's no evidence that there is any more than a single mastodon here, but the researchers are intent on learning as much as possible about it. Usually, neatly deposited layers of soil bury older fragments deeper than newer ones. This helps scientists date their fossils. Here, though, farmers plowing the land have mixed up the layers so that the mastodon is everywhere.
One of the things that we're finding almost in every level of every unit are these tusk fragments. And they're very recognizable. It's kind of a platy look to it. Almost looks like wood, but there is a structure to it and a recognizable pattern to it.
In 2 seasons of work, Demmel and his crew have uncovered only a small percentage of the mastodon, and so the work goes on. Chicago's role as crossroads of the continent is clear today, just as it was 13,000 years ago. when both mammoths and mastodons ranged the terrain together. They're both so similar to modern elephants that many people think mammoths and mastodons are closely related. In fact, though, they're only distant cousins.
Mastodons and mammoths look similar from the outside. A mammoth is just a hairy elephant. A mastodon is not a hairy elephant. Inside, it's a very different critter.
Place them side by side, and their different shapes are clear. The mammoth stood 10 to 12 feet high and weighed 6 to 8 tons. The mastodon was smaller, at 8 to 10 feet and 4 to 6 tons. The mammoths also had longer, curlier tusks. But the most important difference between the two animals was in their teeth.
Mammoths and mastodons lived at the same time in the same areas. However, their teeth tell us that they occupied different niches, meaning that they had different jobs in the habitat around them. They ate different things, for instance, and their teeth tell us that. The mastodon has more of a bumpy or irregular tooth pattern, meaning that they needed this pattern to eat coarse vegetation, branches from, say, a black spruce. Whereas a mammoth who lived in the same area has a flatter tooth surface, ridged. This was a grazing animal, munching and crushing softer vegetation. So the two could live together, not compete over food.
Just like today, the Chicago of 13,000 years ago is a place where waterways meet the plains, where mammoths ate grass and mastodons browsed the forests. In modern Chicago, each would be able to reach the elevated train tracks with their trunks. At the dig outside Chicago, the search is on for what killed the mastodon whose bones are buried here.
These are pieces of chert or flint that's left over from flint knapping. We had to sort through about 500 pounds of glacial gravel out here to come up with 4 real flakes. So this means that man was out at this site. There's no doubt about it.
The flint flakes are likely from arrowheads made by Native Americans of the recent past because they were found in upper layers of soil.
What we're not finding yet is evidence of man down deeper in association with the mastodon. But that's what we're looking for.
If they're successful, they'll prove that Paleo-Indians lived in this spot. They are the Clovis people, named for stone spear points first found in Clovis, New Mexico. Their remains have been found in the region, but never this close to the city. The Clovis people crossed the land bridge from Asia in the far north and migrated throughout North America.
Paleo-Indians have been in the Chicagoland area for 12 to 14,000 years.
Early humans in this setting are the ultimate predators. Far more dangerous than the saber-toothed cats or dire wolves that stalk the territory at the same time. For the ancient Clovis hunters, the early elephant is an enormous prey, taking exquisite skill to bring down.
I have enormous respect for the Clovis people. Before the introduction of high-powered rifles, killing an elephant, Indian elephant or an African elephant, was hard. Even musket balls, you'd have to shoot an elephant 40 times to bring one down. Clovis technology, the spear points, and the way they would attack in groups is probably the most efficient way to kill elephants ever to have been invented before the high-powered express rifle of the 1870s.
They would strike and then retreat, strike and retreat, and wait for the mastodon to either lose blood or get stuck in the mud. And so they would just sort of wait for that animal to die.
Mastodon and mammoth hunts couldn't have gone on in Chicago for more than a few thousand years. By 10,000 years ago, for reasons no one knows, both died out completely, together with other big creatures collectively known as megafauna. The moderate temperatures and plentiful vegetation made Chicagoland ideal habitat for them. And man the hunter is often blamed for their downfall. A second theory blames climate change. And a third is centered on disease.
During the late Ice Age, animals were moving from South America to North America, from Asia to North America, from Europe to Mongolia. There was this mixing, and when you mix animals, you mix diseases and pests and parasites, and you could have an epidemiological nightmare. I like that theory.
The Great Migrations may have led to North America's Great Mass Extinction event, when about 40 animal species weighing a ton or more completely disappeared. The die-off remains one of the Ice Age's greatest mysteries. If the city of Chicago were here 70 million years ago, dinosaurs would probably have stalked Lakeshore Drive, the city's great waterfront thoroughfare, although there is no trace of them there now. In fact, there has never been a single dinosaur fossil found in all of Chicagoland, or even in the entire state of Illinois.
The reason we haven't found any evidence of dinosaurs in the Chicago area is pretty simple. We just don't have any rocks or sediments that are of the age of the Mesozoic era, which is when they were present.
About 25 miles from downtown, paleontologist Ellen Beltz explores a stream called Sawmill Creek, where the massive gap in Chicago's history is glaringly clear.
This rock is 400 million years old. That hillside is composed entirely of loose glacial debris. It's only about 10,000 years old. So that means there's 400 million years of rock missing from right here.
So where did 400 million years of rock go? The best guess is most of it was ground away by wind and water, and finally, Chicago's glaciers. Dinosaur bones today are found mostly where Mesozoic rocks are exposed at the surface, which is why the Dakotas and Montana are among the richest sources. Chicago sits in a barren wasteland when it comes to dinosaur fossils, but they must have been here at some point. The best clues to the case of Chicago's missing dinosaurs are in the neighboring state of Missouri, where Guy Darrow and his staff recreate the distant past for museums and parks, building super accurate life-size models of local creatures at his Lost World studios.
Try to decide here and see if this one's gonna fit. Put that back in there. I think you've got that opening. Build it out, right? Oh yeah, that's looking pretty good. Move his eye a little there. Oh yeah, that's looking good.
Darrow derives his expertise from 40 years of fossil hunting. He is also curator of the Bollinger County Museum of Natural History and is working with geologist Mike Fix on a nearby dinosaur dig called the Chronister Site for the family that once owned the land.
This is the only place in the entire state of Missouri where dinosaur remains have ever been found, and they were found completely by accident. It's one of those serendipitous situations.
All right, if you guys come on back here, I'll give you an idea of where the bones were found and a little bit about the history. In 1942, a geologist accidentally stumbled upon a well that was being dug down here and happened to notice in the pile of clay that was being dug that there were these bones, which of course the people digging the well thought that they were cow bones, but the geologist that found them knew immediately that they were not cow bones and that they were probably most likely dinosaur. And for Missouri, that was an extremely rare and significant find.
But not surprising. Dinosaurs were found on every continent in the Mesozoic. Both Missouri and Chicago were dry land at that time, so dinosaurs most likely lived in both places.
I think it's virtually certain that any dinosaurs that we find here likely had counterparts in the Chicago area.
Travel back 70 million years ago. the late Cretaceous, near the end of the age of dinosaurs. The world is warm, with no polar ice caps. The Midwest is covered with forests. Flowering plants and trees are displacing more primitive ferns and cycads. A 30-foot, 4-ton hadrosaur makes its way through the thick woods of prehistoric Chicago, a place unlikely to be called the Windy City now. Hadrosaurs are known as the cows of the Cretaceous. They eat nothing but coarse vegetation like needles, leaves, twigs, and seeds, which are ground up by hundreds of teeth along their jaws. They're called duck-billed dinosaurs for the broad shape of their tough beaks, good for tearing food from plants. But in the age of dinosaurs, there are also predators. Fossils in Missouri hint at the presence of tyrannosaurs in Mesozoic Chicago. Perhaps not the T-Rex, largest of the family, but one of the other 6 known species. The vicious tyrannosaur would like to make a meal of the hadrosaur. But it doesn't always succeed.
There are a couple of duckbill skeletons, beautiful things, where they were bitten by a tyrannosaur. The tyrannosaur ripped off the tops of some of the bones in the spine. But for some reason, the duckbill got away and survived long enough for the breaks to heal.
Recent research on Dakota, a rare hadrosaur specimen whose soft tissues were fossilized, shows these creatures were heavily muscled and may have had the strength to escape from a tyrannosaur.
It's not impossible that these animals could have outrun one. They certainly would have needed to if they wanted to stay alive.
It is a dogged pursuit. The peaceful plant eater stumbles ahead as the powerful, frightening carnivore tries to close in. The tyrannosaur, relying more on strength than speed, expects an easy chase and is surprised as the hadrosaur's clumsy run is just fast enough. The hadrosaur escapes. And the tyrannosaur goes hungry. Both creatures, however, are doomed. A great mass extinction will soon bring the age of dinosaurs to a horrifying end. After 160 million years of success, the die-off is often blamed on a giant asteroid that struck the Yucatan Peninsula 65 million years ago. Chicago's place on the Earth next to the Great Lakes is easy to spot, even when seen from space. But in the distant past, Chicago was far more anonymous. Travel back 260 million years ago. This is Earth of the Permian, the last geologic period before the dinosaurs. The first beetles and flies have evolved, and finback reptiles called dimetrodons are the dominant predators. There are no Great Lakes, and Chicago of the time is an empty, obscure spot, just north of the equator in the dry interior of a global supercontinent called Pangaea. If O'Hare Airport were here, the snowstorms of the 21st century would be replaced by the sandstorms of this desert age. Pangaea's Chicago has no reputation for excitement. But that will soon change when it receives a visitor from outer space. Half a mile in diameter, it is a massive meteor on a collision course with Earth. Hitting the upper atmosphere, it soon becomes a red-hot fireball, trailing behind it a flaming ribbon of burning debris. It hurtles toward a prehistoric Chicago with no defense.
We're at Big Bend Lake in Des Plaines, Illinois. It's north of Chicago, about 20 miles. It's the site of a major impact site. It happened millions of years ago. The lake you see behind us, people might think has something to do with the meteor impact, but it actually has absolutely nothing to do with it at all. All evidence of the meteor impact is 100 feet or more below the ground surface.
If there's no trace of the meteor impact on the surface, how do we know it's there? The evidence comes from operations like this. Geotechnical drilling is used to pull cores of rock out of the earth so geologists can examine what's there. Drill rigs are also used for digging ordinary water wells. Years of this drilling in the 20th century revealed something strange below Des Plaines.
You recognize that the rocks they were drilling through were very unusual. They were soft and broken up compared to just what's found outside of this small area.
Unlike the neat sedimentary layers of rock found elsewhere in Chicagoland, the rocks below Des Plaines were disjointed, faulted, and disturbed. And so the underground phenomenon was named the Des Plaines disturbance. The cause of the disturbance was a profound mystery. No one even suspected a meteor.
When I first started studying geology, they called the Des Plaines disturbance a cryptovolcanic structure. There's no sign of the meteor crater under Des Plaines on the surface because the glaciers came in and removed all the material that was on top.
The ice sheets also covered the landscape with hundreds of feet of debris, known as glacial till.
And up until the 1960s, people didn't have an idea that there was a lot of meteor impacts that had ever hit the Earth. And it's only been in recent decades that we've recognized that meteor impacts are fairly common in the geologic record.
Like the Mesozoic rocks with evidence of Chicago's dinosaurs, the forces of erosion ground away the meteor's surface crater, and it was later buried by the glacial rubble that covers most of Chicago today. The puzzle was solved after digging began in the 1970s for Chicago's giant tunnel and reservoir project. A 109-mile network of 30-foot drainage tunnels, including a section beneath Des Plaines. 317 feet underground, geologist Ray Wiggers visits the deep tunnel pumping station, hub of the mega project. One byproduct of construction was solid proof that Des Plaines was once hit by a meteor.
When they began the Deep Tunnel project, they came across the smoking gun that actually proved there had been a major impact in this area, and that's the smoking gun right there. This is a shatter cone structure, and you can see how the pattern radiates out from the top to the bottom. That could only be formed when an impact from above hit the Earth's crust, and that energy fanned out in that pattern.
Shatter cones are found only in impact craters, and the Des Plaines crater is a big one. At 6 miles across, it covers an area 50 times bigger than Arizona's famous Barringer crater. Underground evidence shows the meteor struck sometime between 160 and 360 million years ago. If such a meteor hit downtown today, Chicago would be wiped off the map. If Chicago is best known for its frigid winters, it makes up for the chill with its sizzling summers. But even the hottest months here are mild when compared to its steamy past. Travel back 300 million years ago. It's called the Carboniferous period. Chicago sits not at the edge of a lake, but in coastal swamps at the western edge of the landmass that will break away from the other continents to become North America.
During the Carboniferous, Chicago was smack dab on the equator, and as a result, we actually had a tropical rainforest environment.
The Carboniferous period gets its name from its lush coal forests, the swamps that are destined to become the fossil fuels of the future. Both the forest and the nearby water have their share of bizarre creatures. On land, the strangest inhabitant must be Arthropleura, a millipede bigger than any other in history. It grew to be more than 10 feet long.
From what I understand of Arthropleura, I believe it is the largest land arthropod of all time. Arthropod being what I like to call the creepy crawly critters, represented today by insects, spiders, in this case centipedes and millipedes.
In the Carboniferous, millipedes grew enormous. They grew to 10 feet long.
From the fossil evidence that we've seen, Arthropleura was covered with a lot of spines. So we took the time on this particular model to put, like 2,500 spines, I believe, is on here. And for an animal that crawls along the primeval floor, it would have to be covered with spines or something to keep it from being et.
But at 10 feet long, Arthropleura faces few threats from predators. Could this monster have been a threat to others?
When you look at Arthropleura and how large it was, you're tempted to think this must have been a mighty carnivore of the Carboniferous forest. If it was like modern millipedes, though, it actually ate the plant matter that had fallen down onto the forest floor.
Arthropleura is as big as it is because the ancient Carboniferous atmosphere is oxygen-rich from the explosion of plant life in the coal forests. The Carboniferous atmosphere has 2/3 more oxygen than today's. It's a distinct advantage for animals like these, which take in oxygen through pores in their skin.
If you get to a certain size with, for example, our current level of oxygen, you just can't get any bigger without suffocating. However, if you have more oxygen in the atmosphere in the Carboniferous, that allows insects and other creatures to get bigger.
Among the big insects is a carnivorous dragonfly with a 2.5-foot wingspan and an appetite for small lizards. Rich oxygen also boosts the number of amphibians and reptiles as they evolve from water to land life, making it easier for them to breathe. In the waterways of the swampy environment lives Chicago's strangest resident of all time, a slippery, undulating, soft-bodied creature called the Tully monster.
The Tully monster is a very interesting fossil. It was discovered by an amateur collector named Francis Tully in the 1950s. Nobody knew what it was.
Paleontologists worldwide are stumped by the Tully monster, unable to figure out where it stands on the evolutionary ladder. Cousin to a worm, or a squid, or an octopus. They just don't know.
This is a fairly typical Tully monster fossil. If you look at this thing, you can see it's an elongate animal. It has a proboscis with a jaw-like apparatus on the anterior end. You can see two possible eyes, and it has an elongate body with a fluked tail.
Based on thousands of Tully monster fossils, scientists now have a good picture of what this strange animal looked like, though they can still only guess about its behavior.
We really don't know what Tully's ate, but the best guess is that it was a predator because it doesn't seem to have any mouth parts or digestive structure that would show that it ate plants. It had a long claw, a long proboscis that ended in a curved shape that had 8 hard little pegs in it, and some people call those teeth. And what we think it did was we think it swam along through the water with this proboscis out in front and grabbed up whatever it wanted to eat and stuffed it into its feed cavity on the bottom of the animal.
The enigmatic Tully monster is the state fossil of Illinois, and for good reason. It's found only on the fringes of Chicagoland and nowhere else on Earth. Chicago's Sears Tower is the city's tallest building. At 110 stories and 1,450 feet high, it's the tallest building in North America and the third tallest in the world. Chicago is where the world's first skyscraper was built. And today's tall structures wouldn't be possible without the ancient bedrock beneath the city.
The modern 20th century skyscrapers and 21st century skyscrapers you see here need to be anchored very firmly in the bedrock, which unfortunately is not too near the surface. What you have to do is dig down through about 40 or 50 feet of very soft, oozy clay and silt that the lake once deposited here when the lake surface was higher, and to get to the bedrock and actually bolt the supports for the skyscraper onto the rock itself.
But 25 miles to the south, at the Thornton Quarry, the bedrock is exposed. This is one of the largest operations of its kind in the world. The bedrock is limestone, and since 1836, they've been mining it here for use as a building material. Today, mostly as crushed limestone for a wide range of construction projects.
All the rocks that are exposed in the Thornton Quarry are Silurian in age. That was basically around 425 million years ago. This was under the ocean, formed as an ancient reef, and the rocks are full of fossils.
Travel back 425 million years ago. In the Silurian period, the first higher plants are growing on land, but all animal life remains in the oceans. Chicago is submerged, and early reefs are thriving here. Their skeletons will become the future limestone bedrock of the city. Among the strange creatures that swim in these waters are giant cephalopods, ancient predators related to today's chambered nautilus and other tentacled animals like squid and octopus.
This is a nautiloid. This essentially is a straight-shelled cephalopod that would get up to maybe, this specimen maybe be 3 or 4 feet long. If you look at in cross-section, you see there's a tube that runs through the middle of the posterior part of the animal. And what it does with that tube is it controls gas pressure within these chambers. So it can control its position up or down, or primarily stay right where it wants to be. And it functions like a submarine does, essentially.
Gliding up and down in the water above the reef, the cephalopod may encounter creatures like trilobites crawling on the ocean bottom. Related to the modern horseshoe crab, they thrived on the Earth for 250 million years.
Trilobites, for a long time, have been the second favorite fossil for collectors. They have an appeal that transcends any other type of organism except dinosaurs themselves.
They're also favorites for the cephalopods, who are eager to make dinner out of them.
Now we know that the trilobites had defenses against them. One of the trilobite defenses was to curl up in a tight little ball. And we've actually found these petrified, these little trilobite curled up, please don't eat me balls, that they made out of themselves.
The cephalopod was probably equipped with a beak, so it could crack the shell of a curled up trilobite. Hunger satisfied until the next mealtime. This shallow Silurian sea stretched from Chicago to New York and south to Kentucky and West Virginia. It left behind limestone that now spans the Great Lakes region. Called Niagara limestone, it's exposed in a long, continuous arc reaching all the way to New York State, where today, water flows over its surface at Niagara Falls. In 1869, the same limestone was used to build Chicago's old water tower, one of the city's most beloved landmarks. This is the only building still standing to have survived the 1871 Chicago fire.
Here at the water tower, you can actually see direct evidence of the life of the Silurian period. Here's the cross-section of a brachiopod shell. This has been in this stone for 420 million years.
The region's bedrock is the starting point where time and history pass through layers in the solid rock of Earth, leaving clues to the changing climate, geology, and life. 500 million years on this singular spot at the crossroads of the continent, when it was prehistoric Chicago.